Hello everyone, it's Shari here today, and in today's video I'm going to be making this set of snowflake stenciled cards. So for all 5 cards today I'm going to use the same snowflake stencil. I'm going to be using actually the smallest snowflake. You can see I'm pointing to the middle size, but I actually end up using the smallest one. Each one is going to be similar in that it's going to be put onto a outside in stitched rectangle panel, as you can see here. And each one is going to use a different technique through the stencil. So for 2 of the cards, I'm going to make a rainbow panel using these strips of cardstock. They're cut to 1/2 inch wide. And to put these together, I'm just going to use a piece of typing paper because it's thin. And you can see there I've cut each of these to be slightly larger than the stitch rectangle panel. That's because I'm going to die cut these once I get all these pieces onto this piece of typing paper. So I've just put adhesive all over this little piece of paper, and for the first one I'm going to go at a diagonal. And I'm just going to start somewhere here in the middle with a red strip. And I've put all these in the order in which I'm going to use them. So then I'm going to go in with a guava. So the first one was chili pepper. We then have guava, fake tan, followed by sunflower, cilantro, peacock, and blue jay, and then I'm going to go in with my sugar plum above my red, and then of course blue jay is going to repeat above that. And I didn't quite have it straight, so I'm just going to pull it off, make sure it's nice and snug up against that red. And I'll finish it off with cilantro, which actually wasn't right, it should have been peacock, but I actually fixed it. And then I can just trim off those extra pieces. So I kind of have this messy rectangle here with the typing paper. And this is where I realized that that should actually be peacock. So luckily this adhesive, although it's nice and strong, it's not too strong. I can easily pull that piece of cilantro up and put the peacock on there. And then I'm also going to add a little piece of cilantro just to that little white corner there, just to be safe. It may not matter, it may not be part of the die cut, but just so I don't end up with a little white corner accidentally. So now that I have these all on there diagonally, I can take that outside in stitched rectangle and line it up, and then I'll just run this through my die cut machine. And since this was put onto a piece of typing paper, it's going to cut nicely just like one layer of cardstock. So I'll just hold that in place with some washi tape, and here I have that diagonal rainbow panel. For the other one, I'm going to do sort of the same thing, but I'm just going to go horizontal with my pieces. And for this one, I wanted it really nice and even. So I'm actually going to leave a gap you're going to see here towards the bottom. So I'm putting them all in the same order as I did on the other one. But I want the purple to be at the very bottom, and then I'm going to cover the gap with a sentiment. And this just so it goes from red to purple and I don't end up with any red at the bottom to fill out the rectangle. So I'm just kind of checking it to make sure it's far enough down to where it's going to fill the whole die cut. And then I can line up my die cut, and for this one I'm actually going to line it up upside down. So I'm going to put my washi tape on my die already, and I'm doing it this way because then I can see the cut line a little bit better. So now I can take that top edge, which is where the top of the red is, line it up with that cut line, and then just lay it down, and it'll stick to those 2 pieces of washi tape. And then I can just run that through my die cut machine, and now I have this perfectly spaced rainbow panel. Now because these are on typing paper, they're a little flimsy. You could see I could just fold that over really easily. So I'm going to put both of these onto just a white cardstock die cut panel of that same size, and this will just give them more stability. So now it's like a nice solid piece of cardstock. And I'm going to do the same to the diagonal one as well. And I'm just using liquid glue to hold the panel to the back of the typing paper. And so for all these cards, I'm going to use the exact same size panel. I'm going to do some on white and some on the colored pieces. So I'm actually switching over to that smaller one because I just felt like it was nicer spacing and fit the panel a little bit better. So I'm going to be using my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station for my stenciling. I'm putting a little bit of removable adhesive on the back of the panel. And I'm going to do this same setup for every one of these. So I'm just going to show this part once. So I'm putting that removable adhesive on the back of the panel just to hold it onto the mat so it doesn't move around. I'm using the grid lines to kind of line up the center of my snowflake. And I'm kind of using the thickness of my finger to make sure it's all kind of spaced evenly. It's not perfect, but it works. And then you can use the magnets that stick to this metal mat to hold the stencil in place. Now I'm starting out with my 3 magnets there, but what I realized was I really need to protect the edges of this stencil on the off chance that I go off the edge, because it happens a lot. I'm not the neatest sometimes, and that's really close to the edge. So I'm just going to mask that off with some Post-it note tape, and that will protect it. So this first one, I'm using an opaque paste or gel. This one happens to be like a metallic, pearly white color. And so this will give you a nice bright white snowflake on this colored background. You could also use a opaque texture paste like Ranger white texture paste. That would work as well. Or any color that you might want to use. So I'm just using my palette knife to make sure that that whole snowflake is coated. And then I'll carefully remove the magnets. And while I hold my stencil in place, I'm going to remove the tape. So be sure that you're holding the stencil down when you remove the tape, because I had one, I tried to pull the tape and it pulled the stencil too, and it smeared this all over the place. So you just want to be careful. And then you can pick that up and you get that nice bright white snowflake on that really colorful background. So for my second one, I've placed my stencil in the same place, used that Post-it note tape, but for this one, I'm going to use transparent texture paste, and then I'm going to cover it in Prismaglitter. So this is my friend Jen's technique of making your own glitter paste. So you just want to apply that transparent paste through the stencil, just like I did with the other paste. And this is a lot thinner, so it's a little easier to work with. And I'm just carefully making sure that whole snowflake gets coated. So once I have that layer of paste down, I can remove my stencil. So I'm going to carefully lift that up, making sure not to shift it around. And you can see that you don't see this too terribly much, and this paste is going to dry clear. So that might be kind of a cool look if you're going for like a subtle background. It'll just be shiny. Actually, this dries matte, but we're going to cover it with the Prismaglitter. So I'm just going to dump that directly onto this snowflake. And then this is going to stick to that paste and basically make it look like it's glitter paste. So you can dump all that excess off, just kind of flick it from the back, make sure it all comes off. And then any stray that might be sticking because of static, once this is dry, you can brush that away with a dry brush. So for the third one here, I'm going to do that same technique actually, but I'm going to ink through my stencil first. So we're going to ink through the stencil and also add the transparent paste with the glitter. So I'm just going to go in with my Lawn Fawn ink colors that match the colored papers that I used on the first 2 card panels. So I'm going to start with my lightest first, which is Sunflower. I'm just filling in one of those branches of the snowflake. Now I'm going to go in with fake tan. And I'll just blend back and forth between the two. Next, I'm going to go in with chili pepper. And then I will move on to my cooler colors. I'm just going to go in with a dry paper towel and sort of wipe off some of that ink that's on the stencil so I don't get muddy look from my colors blending too terribly much. So for the green, I'm using cilantro. And then peacock for the blue at the bottom. Again, I've used that Post-it note tape so that I don't go past the stencil and ruin my background. That's protecting it. And then finally, I'll go in with sugar plum. So you can see you get that beautiful rainbow snowflake, which you could actually just stop here. I think it's really pretty as it is. But I'm going to continue on with my techniques that use paste through the stencil. So I'm going to line the stencil back up. And yes, you really should remove it and clean off the ink before you do this because the paste will pick up that ink that's on the stencil and you don't want it to muddy up the beautiful colors that you've already put onto that panel. So once you've got that stencil cleaned up, I've just set it back up here onto my mat and I'm going to add that transparent paste again. So this is the same as before, it's just this time instead of doing it over some colored paper, we're doing it over the inked snowflake. And I'll just scrape that excess off once I have it nice and coated. I actually had a little piece of fuzz in here, that's what I'm picking out with my tweezers. And then once that's nice and coated, I can remove my stencil just like before, making sure I pick it directly up off that background. And you can't really see that paste right now because of the colors underneath, but we're going to do just like before and dump that Prismaglitter right onto that snowflake. I do want to mention that I go and I clean off my stencil and my palette knife immediately after doing this so that none of that paste dries onto my stencil and it stays nice and clean. So now you have this glittery rainbow snowflake, which I just think is so pretty. This one might be my favorite of the 5 that I made for today's video. So for the fourth one here, I'm going to use this Decofoil Transfer Gel Duo. So this is a new product to me. Unlike the other transfer gel where you have to use a laminator, this you can just run through your die cut machine and transfer the foil with just the pressure of your die cut machine. So this is going to be fun to use. So this is clear, just like the paste we used before, but you have to let it dry before you run it through your die cut machine with the foil. So we're just going to apply this and it's not going to look like very much right now. It's just going to be a clear paste on a white background, pretty boring, and then we're going to let it dry and then we will add the foil once it's all nice and dry. So you could do a whole bunch of these all at once and then have fun adding all different colors of foil. This is me being very careful to remove my tape first because this was the one that I messed up and my stencil smudged my paste. So like I said, this one's not very exciting at the moment. You can see the gel on there. I'm going to pick it up so you can see it in the light. And we'll just let this dry. It says to let it dry at least an hour. So I was going to stop there, but then I had a 5th idea. Now this one does not use paste. This is using some embossing ink. So this is that clear, sticky embossing ink. And I'm just taking it directly to the paper. I'm looking at it from the side so I can see the shininess of the ink and make sure it's well coated. And then I'm going to put white embossing powder on this. So if you don't have any pastes in your stash, this is another fun technique that you could kind of get the same look, because we're going to end up with a white snowflake, and then I'm going to do some inking. So it's going to be an emboss resist. But you could use the same technique on the first one that I did. You could easily add the embossing ink and the white embossing powder onto that colored paper strip panel that I made at the beginning and get the same look as you get with the opaque pastes. So I've heated up that white embossing powder and melted it, and now I can ink over top of it. And I'm going to use the same colors that I did when I inked the snowflake through the stencil. So that's sunflower and fake tan. And I'll go back and forth between these because I'm going to blend it all the way out to the edges. So you're going to see me go back and forth quite a few times. For the red, again, I'm using chili pepper. And I brought in a piece of just scrap paper to kind of tap off the excess because I kind of got a big blob of that fake tan there because I wasn't tapping off the ink at the beginning. But I will blend that out here in just a little bit. And I also clean off my mat. That's what I was doing there, and getting rid of the moisture between colors every now and then so that they don't mix together off the mat and get muddy. So this is Sugar Plum. That is the purple that I used. And I'm going to wipe off that purple so I don't pick it up with my green or my blue, because I'm not so sure that the green and the purple together would look very pretty. Cilantro is what I'm using for the green. And I'm just using the points of that snowflake as my guides to where to put my colors. This is me going back with the yellow to kind of blend it out towards the outside. And then finally towards the bottom, I'm going to go in with peacock. There's going to be a lot more color at the bottom. So I'm going to start by taking that peacock ink and I'm going to take it directly down from the snowflake to the bottom edge of the panel, and then I'll start to work my way out towards the corners with that ink. And this way I can kind of see better where the green and the purple need to go. So you can see I've got some white between those two. So I'm going to go back in with that cilantro ink and that Sugar Plum ink and start to fill in that white space, and then blend the green with the blue and the purple with the blue. So once I've got it looking the way I want with all the ink on there, I'm just going to go in with a dry paper towel and buff off the ink that's sitting on top of that white embossing for the snowflake. And then there is that finished panel for the 5th card. So this is kind of a bonus one that doesn't use the paste through the stencil. So that transfer gel on that 4th one that we did has dried, and I'm going to run it through my die cut machine with some of this deco foil. This is like a rainbow like shatter pattern, I guess. So I'm just going to cut out a square that's big enough to cover my snowflake. Unfortunately, I'm not going to get all these colors in there. This one's going to be more blues to green to yellow. And then I'm just going to lay that on top of my snowflake, making sure that whole part is covered that has the gel. And then I'll just run this through my die cut machine in the same sandwich I would do with a thin steel die. And the pressure from the die cut machine is what's going to transfer that foil to the paste that's dried. So I've run that through, and then I was just kind of burnishing it in with my bone folder a little bit, and then now I can pull that foil away and it's transferred over to my snowflake. So here are the 5 panels we created. This is an opaque paste on this colorful background, and this is the metallic pearl that I used. This one has a transparent gel with the Prismacolor glitter added to it, so you get kind of a custom glitter paste. This one is that same thing, but with an inked snowflake underneath. This one is the transfer gel that you can use with your die cut machine, so the pressure transfers the deco foil to the paper. And then the final one here is the white embossed snowflake with the inking on top. So I'm going to make the same sentiment for each of these. The sentiment words for this come from the Mice on Ice set, and it just says joyful wishes, which I think is good all year round. So these are kind of happy winter cards. I would not classify these as holiday cards because it's still winter, so that's why I really liked using the snowflake. But with all the rainbow colors, I think they're fun for any time. So for each of these, I'm going to white emboss the sentiment onto a sentiment banner that's cut from different colors of cardstock depending on which card I'm applying it to. I'm also going to put foam tape on the back of every panel so that it's popped up off of the background, off the card base. So this is the first one. This is a white card base. This is that first one I created with a diagonal background and the pearl paste. And the banner for this one is just cut from black cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and put all the panels on the card bases. I'm doing the other colorful one on a white card base. This one I'm going to do on a fog card base because the panel is white, so you get kind of a slight contrast. Same for the foiled one. And actually this one is the inked one, so this is going to go on a white card base just like the other colorful ones. And then for the foil one, I actually did think a little bit different. I used some of that holographic paper. I cut it slightly larger than my panel. And I'm going to give this one a border. And I just think that holographic paper really goes with the foil well. This one's sort of iridescent because it's holographic, so it goes with the colors in the snowflake. So this one's going to have a little bit of a border around it. I'm popping that up on the foam, and then this part I'll just glue directly to the card base. This one's also on a fog colored card base. For the sentiments on each of these, I'm just going to put some glue through the center, and then I'll put a little foam square on each end because the banner overhangs the panel that's popped up on foam. And then I'm just going to line it up on my grid mat to help me get it straight. I can kind of put it on there, and since it's liquid glue, I can sort of move it around until it gets straight. And then once I have it where I want it, I'm just going to press down the ends where the foam squares are, and it will hold it in place. And I'm going to use the same technique for all 5 cards. So on this one, remember we left that gap. So that's exactly where my banner is going to go. It's going to cover up that gap. And now we look like we have a nice even rainbow panel, and you would never know that gap was there. So for the white panels that's on the fog card base, I actually used some narwhal cardstock. So it's not quite as stark as the black, but it looks really nice on that white panel. And then for the final one here, I actually put that sentiment banner on a piece of storm cloud. So it's that dark gray. Not quite as stark as on the colorful stripes, but I think that it stands out enough on that inked background without being too harsh. And then here is a look at all 5 of the cards that I created in today's video, each one with a slightly different technique using that snowflake stencil. I would love to hear which is your favorite out of this set and which technique you would like to try. Here's a couple more images of these cards. I think my favorite might be the inked snowflake with the glitter on top. I just think it's nice and simple, but I love that color pop right in the center. Thanks so much for watching and have an amazing day. Bye!